Beam me aboard.
Energize.
Energizing.
Kirk to transporter room. Report.
You're listening to Transporter Room 3 with your hosts, Phil Perello and Scott Calora.
Welcome, listeners, to Transporter Room 3. I am your co-host, Phil Perello, and with me is your other co-host, Scott Calora.
Hey, what's up?
How you doing, Scott?
I'm all right. I'm riding the Man of Steel high, or not high, I guess, depending on how you look at it.
Well, it's better than riding the Into Darkness low.
Yeah, that's been on a lot lately on HBO or something, and it just gets worse and worse.
Into Darkness?
I'm sorry. I thought you said. I thought you said I thought you said The Dark Knight Rises.
Oh no, I said the Into Darkness low.
See, I have a mental block against Star Trek Into Darkness. I don't hear that. I don't recognize it or talk about it. So.
But then you go right to an even darker place at Dark Knight Rises.
Well, depends. From a certain point of view, I guess it's darker.
From a certain point of view.
So
speaking of Kirk, that's who we're talking about today in one of his most underrated episodes.
Yes, we are going back to the real Kirk, the original Kirk.
Original series, baby.
Yeah, and we before Into Darkness came out, we kept saying we were gonna do a Voyager episode or an Enterprise episode, and we will. Maybe we will next time. But I think we wanted to. After Into Darkness, I think we wanted to kind of talk about old school original Star Trek a little bit. And it's sort of, yeah, like you say, sort of one of the more underrated episodes. Not one that's frequently talked about, but it's a very good one for sure.
Yeah, should be talked about more. The episode is The Conscience of the King.
Yeah, it's all fancy Shakespeare.
All fancy Shakespeare goodness.
Yeah.
It is goddamn good at television.
Yeah.
Scott, I don't know why I'm blanking. I just watched it. Season 1?
Yeah, it's season 1. But wait, before we real quick though, we just wanted to, before we get into the episode, we wanted to just point out that this afternoon, it's Monday, reports were just starting to come in as we record this that Richard Matheson died, who is of course the great sci-fi author and writer, and he's done everything from I Am Legend to a bunch of Twilight Zone episodes, but he also wrote The Enemy Within, which is of course the great first season Star Trek episode where Kirk gets split into a duo of Kirks. So we just wanted to kind of mention that, and Richard Matheson will be missed. I love that episode. He obviously the image of sweaty Kirk has permeated the internet pop culture. This give me the brandy. Is that
give me the brandy.
Yeah, you do it better than I do. Yeah, it's a shame, but yeah, okay. So The Conscience of the King. Yeah, it's a first season episode, and it's definitely old school Star Trek too. Like, it feels like, I'm not sure where it was in the production order, but it feels like like Spock isn't quite fully formed in a way.
Yeah, it's a little rough.
Yeah. Well, why don't you break it down for us in terms of just what it's all about?
Well, it's a complicated episode. It starts off really well. Kirk and his friend Tom are watching.
Tom. Kirk's got all these old friends from the academy.
Conveniently.
Convenient old friends from the academy and from early assignments and the such, right?
Yeah, exactly.
He's watching a play, right, with Tom?
Right, yeah. He's watching a traveling troupe of actors performing Shakespeare. And the voice of the lead actor, Tom can't shake. He knows who it is. It's Kodos the Executioner.
Yeah.
A man who, on a world several years ago, when Kirk was a young officer on the Farragut?
I'm not sure. I know he served. Well, yeah, I'm not sure.
He was.
I don't know if they say it in the episode. But.
Yeah, they do, and I'm a poor recapper right now. But Kirk served as a young officer on this planet that Kodos was doing some very dark, scary martial law type things on. And he faked his death and disappeared. And the moment this actor's identity started to live, it coincides directly with when Kodos died. Finger quotes on died.
Right.
And Kodos has a young blonde daughter in this acting troupe. And eventually, Tom has a party for the actors at his house to try to corner Kodos to get him out in the open. And before he has an opportunity to really do that, they find Tom dead.
Right. Yeah. Tom, and he still has his half face mask on.
Yeah, Tom
even in
got
death.
injured, like poorly during the Kodos thing.
During the Kodos thing, which is funny because they mentioned that the 4,000 people that Kodos killed, that he killed them quickly and efficiently, Spock says later in the episode.
Right.
I don't know if that means he just phasered them out of existence or what, but I guess in the case of Tom just caught some shrapnel or something.
Yeah, he caught phaser shrapnel or something. Like, I don't know what happened to Tom, but shit. That guy's face is effed. It's not even... I'd rather have face-off surgery go wrong than have that guy's thing.
Right.
So eventually the acting troupe, the Enterprise, takes them aboard because Kirk has to, for his friend, find out if this is indeed true.
Yeah.
So, and he's got it. It's like it's in his craw now. So the Enterprise agrees.
Kirk actually. I'm sorry to keep interrupting. Kirk manipulates it in such a way that the
Right.
ship that was supposed to transport them, the Astral Queen, is
Right.
he calls in an old favor to the captain of the Astral Queen. It's another one of Kirk's old friends. He's like, oh Jim, I owe you a half a dozen favors or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Astral Queen would later be. I'm assuming that this was in reference to this episode. The Astral Queen was a ship on Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica. And you got to figure it's Ron Moore being, obviously being a huge fan of the old show. He must have named that ship in reference or in tribute to this episode.
It's a damn fine way to get all the actors on board the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And for Kirk to do his recon, and as he's doing this,
and some skirt chasing too.
Yeah, he does a little skirt chasing with Kirk's daughter.
Kodos's daughter.
Kodos's daughter. Excuse me. Kirk develops a personal relationship knowing full well he's manipulating it in a way to figure out if Kodos is indeed Kodos.
Right.
Or what's the actor's name?
Caridian.
Caridian, which is a great name.
I think Caridian, yeah.
And there's actually a pretty solid scene in the observation deck.
Yeah.
Between Kirk and the daughter.
The rarely seen observation deck. Right?
Rarely seen observation deck.
Yeah.
And it turns out that there are two survivors from the massacre that Kodos oversaw on board the Enterprise that can ID who Kodos really is.
Right.
And it's Jim Kirk and Lieutenant Riley, who Kirk demotes for some reason to the worst shift ever in engineering.
I'm not clear on why he did this. Is it as bait?
He did it either in the episode, but I think
it's basically he uses
him as bait.
The way it plays is he's using Riley as bait.
Yeah.
And Riley gets poisoned.
Holy shit. That just doesn't gel, man. That's not a good Kirk moment.
It's like it's a pretty early episode.
But still, they had humanity back then.
Kirk's acting a little un-Kirkish at times, but he also doesn't feel it's real personal for him. He doesn't fill Spock in on what's going on, right?
No.
So like Spock is Spock's trying to figure out why Kirk's acting strangely, and he takes it to McCoy, and McCoy kind of doesn't give a shit.
Right.
So Riley and Kirk are the only two survivors at this point, right? Who could ID Kodos if it is in fact Kodos.
I mean, Memory Alpha interprets that demotion as an attempt on Kirk's part to protect Riley by putting him in the bowels of engineering on the worst shift ever.
All by himself. instead of like confining him to quarters or like keeping him on the bridge where Kirk could see him,
Right. I'm
giving him an armed detail, you know, like.
I'm just feeling that it was more like bait. So his milk gets poisoned, Riley, and kind of Riley, F off for drinking milk, dude. No one drinks milk. No one sits at their shift and eats those food cubes and drinks milk. Food cubes and milk don't go together. Either drink Saurian brandy or whatever's in those cool blue coffee cups.
Yeah. And McCoy, by the way, is drinking I think it's Saurian brandy.
Yeah, he pours those little cups.
And he's I mean, he's just sitting there. It's like, for some reason, it feels like daytime to me, although maybe it's not. Maybe it's the evening. But either way, McCoy's just sitting at work, at his office and work, just sitting there drinking by himself in his uniform. And he keeps talking. He's totally peer pressuring Spock, trying to get Spock to have a drink.
Right.
Spock won't do it.
We're not really selling this episode as a good one, are we, right now? It's got a lot of booze and using people as human bait. But there's this awesome moment later in the episode when, you know, Spock, Kirk, and McCoy, they have that scene where they kind of figure it out, and an attempt is made on Kirk's life with a phaser set on overload.
Yeah, that's a cool scene.
Very cool scene. Kirk finds the phaser in his quarters, disposes of it just in time, and there's an elaborate staging of a Shakespearean play for the Enterprise crew at the end. And this follows an interesting conversation between Kirk and Caridian, which Caridian's daughter Lenore overhears. Because Kirk is basically confronting him.
Yeah.
And Caridian kind of admits that, yes, he is Kodos.
Yeah,
but
he sort of admits it without
ever flat out saying it. He says, you know, it's the voice of a part that he played long ago.
Right.
And Lenore is revealed to be the one killing the men on her father's behalf.
Right. Yeah.
And it goes down in such a dark way when he finally quarters her on the stage. In the middle of the performance, it spills out onto the stage. And it's revealed to both the father, who had no idea what she was doing. And during the production of Hamlet, Caridian is upset that his daughter has spilled so much blood on her hands.
Yeah.
To cover up that which has stained his long ago.
Right. But she's been killing the witnesses to the
all along to save her father.
Yeah.
And then
the only thing that he had left, the only thing Kodos had left in his life was this daughter who was untainted. It was untainted, and it turns out that she was tainted because she was trying to save her dad. So it's a real tragedy, just like Shakespeare, just like the Shakespeare stuff that the Caridian traveling theater company performs.
Right.
It's very effective, though.
Very effective, and that ending is heartbreaking, where she kills her own father. Yeah. And it was a phaser blast meant for Kirk that Kodos took. Yeah. And she just breaks down in the creepiest, scary smile, cry, laugh thing you've ever seen.
Yeah. I think my girlfriend in college did that same creepy cry, laugh, smile thing. But and it's weird because they shoot. I mean, the actual phaser blast is a little awkwardly staged. The way he takes the blast, it's that could have been done a little better maybe. But the way they frame the daughter, it's just a tight close up of her eyes at the moment of realization when she shoots the old man, and it's an interesting shot, and it's really cool. You know what else struck me about it watching it again was I hadn't seen this one in a while, and I watched it for the podcast. The actual episode opens, if you didn't know any better, it opens with the murder that's taking place on stage. It's Kodos or Caridian playing a part, and he's committing a murder, and he stabs a guy, and you see the guy like in his sleep, like in pain and dying. The guy and Caridian has blood on his hands, and if the first time watching the episode, for a moment you might not when they're dressed in Shakespearean garb, and watching the episode for the first time, you wouldn't know it was a Star Trek episode. It doesn't open with a captain's log or a spaceship or anything, and it's also kind of you don't know that it's a play that's being enacted either. So it's sort of a violent, grotesque opening for an episode of television in 1967, and then it all pulls back and you realize you're watching a play. But it's a really different kind of approach to a Star Trek episode,
right,
to open things off. And the whole episode feels, and this is why I really enjoy this sort of first half of the season 1 so much, is everything feels a little different than standard Star Trek. Some of the language is all a little different. They're referring to the space service and things like that. And,
right. Like space fleet.
Space fleet or something.
Command,
space
stuff like that.
You can read through every space command on the books, Spock, and things like that. And like you see the observation deck. Like, I don't know, how often do you ever see the observation deck?
I don't. That may be the only time.
Yeah, and then there's stuff like there's weird references that are sort of off, ultimately maybe off continuity. Like McCoy says something to Spock. Spock says something like, "Oh, my father's people never acquired a taste for alcohol," or something like that. And McCoy says something like, "Oh, it's no wonder that your people were conquered."
Yeah.
It's like, what? Wait.
And then Lenore says to Kirk on the observation deck, "And the ship, all this power, surging and throbbing, get under control. Are you like that, Captain?" Yeah, he is.
Yep.
But a great line on this episode from McCoy: "The chain of command is often a noose."
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. It's great. Yeah, it is. Now, I wanted to ask you about something. This isn't necessarily pertaining to this episode, but I watched this on Netflix, and so they have the remastered episodes on Netflix, I guess. So it's got the CGI Enterprise and the remastered special effects. What are your thoughts on that? Because watching it, I would just as soon have the old effects from the original episodes that I grew up watching. Like, do you prefer the CGI stuff?
Yeah, I didn't mind the CG touch.
Mm-hmm.
It added like a nice little dimension to that scene because it's just flat static stars, right, in the original.
Yeah.
But it was a little distracting just because in my head it's like, one of these things doesn't belong.
Well, because it's not like when you then cut to the bridge that like everything there looks high tech and new. I mean, it's still like, right, you can still hear the plywood creaking as Kirk walks across the
and you can see the creases in the quote unquote monitors above their stations.
Yeah, even like because I guess it's a high def version that Netflix is using. So I don't know, because
I believe they are. I think they are doing they are using the HD.
Okay, but it's like the costumes and things as well. You can see creases and stuff that you wouldn't usually be able to see. So it's almost like, well, that stuff is still the old version. I'm not sure why the CG even needs to be there, but I mean that's just a little thing that caught my eye, I guess. I like how Tom, Kirk's friend, he used the ultimate lie of ultimate lies to lure Kirk to the planet, which is that they found a way to end famine in the universe. This'll get my old buddy Kirk here. We've solved hunger. Which, by the way, I thought was solved anyway in the Star Trek.
I thought so too.
But did you know this Yeoman Rand? She has one scene or one shot, I think, where she gets off the turbo lift on the bridge, right when Kodos, his daughter, is getting on the turbo lift, and she gives her this ultimate bitchy stare down look.
A little bit, yeah. It's like, oh, wow.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I know we're having a little fun at this episode's expense, but it is a very strong, dark episode.
No, it is. Yeah, I don't know why.
The themes it it plays around with it. It's pretty solid, and you feel a little sympathy for Kodos.
You do, absolutely. Yeah, he's not a cardboard cutout villain.
No.
And the thing is, and you feel sympathy for his daughter as well, who's really in a lot of ways, she's the real villain of the piece. I mean, she's the one who's committing murder, right? And Kodos says something at one point about how, if the supply ships or the rescue ships hadn't arrived at his colony when they did, that he might have, if they had arrived later, he might have been considered a hero instead of a villain, because he would have been seen as having saved the remaining colonists. Now I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with the logic of his argument, because we don't really know all the circumstances of what happened during the massacre, but it is interesting that that's this idea is sort of raised that this guy might have done it for the greater good, and just like his daughter thinks that she's doing it, what she's doing is for the greater good of her father as well. I timed it because I was noticing as I was watching, aside from that opening scene where we just see Kodos, he does a quick bit of Shakespeare. We don't see him in character as the actual person. He's just playing a Shakespeare character. You don't see him again in the episode until like 31 minutes into it, where Kirk goes to confront him in his quarters, and I thought that was interesting that they actually save him up for the last bits of the episode in a way.
Right. That is interesting. Did you enjoy, for the most part, like how everything like pushed to that really dark ending? Like, was that a highlight for you?
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, you kind of think, I mean, it's funny because even though I've seen the episode, I'm sure several times before, I'd kind of forgotten what it was with the, with the daughter being revealed to be the bad guy. I kind of had forgotten that that's where it was all going. So I was sort of surprised by it as well. And yeah, it's cool. It's cool, and I think it must have been pretty dark back then as well, right?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, it must have been, because it's just 60s sci-fi from Twilight Zone to early season 1 and 2 of Trek had some balls.
Yeah.
Like there's that great exchange between Kirk and McCoy. Like what are you gonna do, Jim? Like carry Kodos' head through the halls? It's not gonna bring back the dead. And Kirk just goes, no, but it may help them rest easier.
Yeah.
And you can't argue with that.
Yeah.
And like the Nor throws up at Kirk later in an argument, who are you to pass judgment on this? And Kirk says, who do I have to be?
Right. Exactly.
And that's really good shit right there.
And it's funny how she goes from being so sort of sexy and alluring in the early parts of the episode to really turns around and she kind of becomes this sort of hateful creature, and eventually then those scenes she's sort of hateful. She can feel that she hates Kirk now, and
right.
She says something like, was I a tool for you to get to my father, or something like that, and then eventually she just becomes pitiful, really,
and sad,
but still hot.
Still hot, like the prettiest blonde, man. I don't know how old she is now, but she's really attractive.
It almost felt like they went handheld too in those final moments, or at least in one of the shots when she runs out on stage. She grabs the security guard's phaser and runs out on stage. It actually felt like sort of handheld, which certainly is not the typical style for the time, right?
Right. It's not. I don't think so.
And I also wanted to just mention poor Riley. That guy, he has a lot of bad luck, doesn't he? Because his whole family was slaughtered, it turns out, on that colony.
Yeah, it was bad. Riley gets screwed, man.
Right. What happens to him eventually? Does he just disappear?
I think he does. I think after season 1 he does. I'm surprised they didn't just give him the Chekhov role.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know. I guess they couldn't have put the mop top wig on him though, right? The monkey's wig.
No, they couldn't.
But yeah, like the ship had more of a feel of a crew. Like aside from, of course you have the main 7, but back then you had more background people like that as well. Like Because there's Riley, and then there's at the end of the episode, the guy sitting at the helm is who's the other one who would show up? Oh, Leslie. Leslie's there as well. And I could have sworn I spotted in the rec room the guy who was a red shirt of ours recently. I think the guy who stabs himself with a butter knife in the Naked Now or the Naked Time. Do you remember that guy?
Yeah. It's not on.
Yeah, which I'm not sure that doesn't make sense, and that doesn't make sense chronologically, I don't think. But the Naked Time was like one of the first. I think that one was shot before this one, but they might have just recycled actors. I'm not sure. But how about, did you enjoy Hora's song and dance routine? Oh, not dance, but her song and Lear. Was she playing a Lear? What was she? She plays a musical instrument in this episode and sings.
It looks like Spock's harp, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, those moments are so weird for me these days when I don't know. Like, this life on that ship feels a little mundane. Like that's the best. Like when you get off your shift, that's the best it is for you, is that you go down and listen to a horror in the rec room. And there's people playing solitaire and stuff down there, right? Like even at least on the Enterprise D, they had Synthahol.
At least they had Synthahol and a holodeck.
I'd
go to the gym, and I'd mess around with the Charlie X equipment.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and Sam.
P90 and, Charlie X. Oh, sorry, that was bad.
I'm not sure if Sam might have been disintegrated by this point, but and now you know. Actually, this is why McCoy would drink alone in his office, I guess, because everyone's down in the rec room listening to horror and playing solitaire. I'd be drinking alone as well.
I would either be drinking alone or beating her with that harp thing. It's like the last time you sang that Charlie's Our New Darling thing, I couldn't get it out of my head for 3 star dates. I'm humming it in the sonic shower. I'm singing it in the turbo lift. I just shut up.
No, but this is a good episode. It's really, I mean, it's, we're always making fun of all this stuff that we talk about to some degree, but it is a pretty good one. It's pretty compelling, and it's not one that is too often talked about. So Kirk just to see Kirk at a cocktail party alone, planet-side cocktail party, is interesting.
I think just that they still throw cocktail parties on alien worlds is interesting to me. It's as close to Kirk gets to Don Drapering.
I was gonna say, it doesn't feel too different from a cocktail party Draper would be at.
No.
Except Kirk doesn't puke in a potted plant and in the scene.
It's true. I just want to see Roger Sterling, the equivalent of Roger Sterling, show up. Tom could have been Roger Sterling if half his face wasn't blown off. But Mad Men jokes aside, this episode is very strong. It's one of Ron Moore's favorites, if not his favorite. I believe he speaks to his affection for this episode on the commentary for The Bonding.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I don't remember. I listened to that commentary. I don't recall that.
I think I believe he talks about it on The Bonding or the Sins of the Father comment. He either talks about it on one of the 2 commentaries he does, or he talks about it in that hour roundtable with all the writers.
Okay. Well, you know what? I was drinking alone in my office when I watched that Blu-ray, so I might just have forgotten.
That's fair. That's fair.
I wasn't trying to peer pressure Spock into drinking with me, though. But well, so then that makes sense then, if it's his favorite episode, or one of his favorites, because, like I said earlier, the Astral Queen is a ship from his Battlestar Galactica, so clearly that connection is there. He named the ship. He got the name for the ship from this episode. Anyway, I guess we should maybe segue into our Red Shirt of the Week, and we also have to make some apologies, I think, regarding our red shirt.
We take this time to remember those who have laid their lives down for Starfleet. This is the Red Shirt of the Week.
Yeah, we messed up on the last red shirt. We doubled up. It was an oldie, but a favorite. And
we said, yeah, we our red shirt was a red shirt that we had previously spoken about, and it happens. What can we say?
We're human, damn it. We're not a bunch of Vulcans or machines.
So and the thing is, we actually had Aaron Page, who is our loyal listener. He had actually put together a list of all the red shirts we've talked about, and so if we had just looked at the list, we would have known. But Aaron, we also and we thank you for pointing out the mistake. And it wasn't just Aaron; it was several other people pointed it out. But Aaron, we also know that we are supposed to bring you on as a special guest at some point with a red shirt. So we still want to do that. So email us and let us know when you're available. And let's move on to our red shirt. This one, I'm 87% sure we haven't talked about before.
Which is much better than we were last week. It's from a little gem called The Deadly Years, Season 2. Old age disease, everybody.
Who could forget The Deadly Years?
Well, not Lieutenant Arlene Galway.
Arlene Galway, who you said earlier is she's rocking the Mia Farrow from Rosemary's Baby.
Look, yeah, she's got. Right. I mean, she looks like she's 12 years old, which is even better for her to die of the old age disease. She undergoes a rapid aging process, and just craps out she just looks like a ropey old woman.
She shits the bed, basically.
Possibly, literally. But Scott, as you were saying, she gets so old and she puts on this scarf, try to cover her age.
She breaks out the regulation Starfleet scarf, to cover up her neck folds, her wrinkled neck, which of course I'm sure was a costume and makeup decision, so they wouldn't have to make up her neck behind the scenes, right? But
she doesn't.
She's sudden. Yeah.
She's the example they make. Like, oh shit, this is what's gonna happen to us if we don't find a cure.
Yeah. And we talked about the fact that she doesn't actually wear a red shirt. And I think I think we've said this before, but it's not about the actual color of the shirt, is it?
No, it's about how they go.
It's about how
you can have a yellow tunic, you can have a blue tunic.
Yeah.
But, granted, there are a lot of red shirts from the original series, and we can get to them, but this one in particular was just it's just like it's a dark, sad way to go, and it's appropriate to follow one of the darker, more sad episodes of original series.
And according to Memory Alpha, it says that she was the first female crew member to die on screen.
Interesting.
Since Dr. Elizabeth Denner in Where No Man Has Gone Before, which was, of course, the second pilot. So really, she was only the second female crew member to ever die on screen, I guess that means. So that's interesting, for sure, because this is a second season episode, I think. So
that is interesting, because there's a medical technician from Wolf in the Fold, mm-hmm. who dies from that Red Jack thing that's taken over Scotty.
Yeah, right.
And they say she's the first woman to die in the regular series.
What? Memory Alpha says that?
No, this site X Astris Scientia.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's your homepage.
That's my homepage. What?
So we've got some conflicting information here. Wolf in the Fold. Well, Wolf in the Fold. What season is that?
I believe that's season dose.
That's the Jack the Ripper episode.
That's Jack the Ripper episode, correct.
Does she actually die on screen though? Because they're saying here
they say she's the first woman to die in the regular series, and that's not true, because that would be Elizabeth Denner.
Elizabeth Denner, yeah, for sure. So, well, what do you expect, man? This is all user-generated content. You figure it's all wrong.
We all make mistakes, even the internet.
All right. Well, anyway, on that note, I think we can close out this pretty crappy episode of Transporter Room 3.
Well, we're glad you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. Next week, what do you think, Scott? Finally, an Enterprise or Voyager?
Yeah, let's do. You know what? I can't remember which ones we spoke about in the weeks and months ago about doing, but let's pick an Enterprise. You want to do an Enterprise episode?
How about we throw up a few suggestions on the Facebook page and see what the readers think?
Yeah, let's do that.
Excellent. All right, well, until then, we'll see you all on Gravette Island.